Okay, so I just finished building something called a queen castle, and a queen castle is something we use as beekeepers to raise new queens. So if you're a beekeeper and you're interested in expanding your apiary, you should look into having at least one of these things. Basically, what it is, a normal sized hive body. In this case, it's a 8-frame hive body, and it has 4 chambers in it, and each one of those chambers is completely isolated from the other one, so that the bees can't cross over from one chamber into the other one, because if they did so, they would kill the queens in the other chambers, and so you want to keep them separate. So it's really just kind of a way to have some dense places, chambers in a small area like this. So this isn't my design, this is a pretty common design. But so what I want to do is I want to talk about how I built it and the features around this one, and then I'm going to talk about how you would actually use a queen castle, because a lot of times that's left out in other videos. So basically, I'm going to take these lids off here. This is not actually a normal sized 8-frame box. It's custom made, but there's 2 differences. The outside dimensions are the same. It's 14 by 20. But one of the differences is the depth of the box is actually a little bit deeper, and there's 2 reasons for that. One is it's got a solid bottom board, not a bottom board, just a solid board on the bottom. The reason for that is you want to seal it up, and I put vent holes on the bottom that are screened in, so each chamber has a vent hole. But because it has that solid bottom, the distance underneath your frame, so here's a frame, and usually when you put this down in a normal body, there's just enough space underneath it so that when you set this whole body on top of another body who has space on the top, you add both of those together and it's just enough bee space. But because it's a solid bottom, if I used a regular hive body, it wouldn't be enough space on the bottom, and when I put a frame in there, I could crush bees. Most importantly, I could crush the queen. So for that reason, it's a little deeper. And then the other change is this rabbit here is also a little deeper set down, and the reason for that is I want the frames to sit a little bit deeper below this edge, so that when these lids go on the top, they have a little recessed part that fits down inside that to make a tighter seal. I'll talk more about the tops in just a second. So that's basically the difference in the size. The other thing that you do is separate it with, if you use too thick of boards, you won't be able to get all 8 frames in there, but you could always do a 3-compartment castle if you wanted to. But because I wanted to have 4 compartments, I used this very thin, it's like an 1/8 or maybe 3/16 plywood, and then I cut trench cuts down the side here, along the bottom, and up this other side. And one of the mistakes that I made is you want this to go all the way over to your rabbit, and because I cut it just a little bit short and didn't think about that, you can see there's a little shim that's in there that I had to glue. If that wasn't there, there's a space, which means that the bees could crawl across from one compartment to the other, and that's the most important thing, that the bees can't cross over from one compartment to some other one. So basically, your trench cuts are in there, you put it all together, and then you slide these down in here. Some of these castles, you can slide these out if you want to, and then use it as a regular hive body. I didn't do that. This is purpose built, and I'm never going to use this for anything except a queen castle. And so I didn't permanently glue these in here, but because I put these little tabs in there, they're sort of stuck in there, but I'll probably never take those out. I could have glued them in. So the other thing is each one of these compartments has to have an entrance, and so there's a hole here, It's just an ordinary hole that goes straight through. So the sides, there's a hole going in the sides, and then for the middle compartments, notice that there's a hole that's offset because that's for compartment number 3, and then on the other side here, you know, is the one for the other compartment. So basically each one has its own opening. So one opening per compartment, and then the vent holes at the bottom. And then the last thing on this is these lids. And so I had to take 2 goes at this because the first set that I made, I was a little bit hasty and they didn't fit very tight. But you want them to fit really tight here. So the little spaces get you a little closer there. Looks like my sun's going to be in my way, but these spaces right here, I have just a tiny bit of wiggle room, you can see that, but even wide open, that's still not enough space for a bee to get through. And so this way it can expand a little bit if it wants to, but all the way around it you don't want any cracks where bees can get out. I've also numbered these too because they're custom built for each one. Even though I tried to make these compartments the same size, you know, they weren't the same size. They were off by like a 1/16 of an inch or so. And so these are numbered, so these are all custom built. Last thing on the tops is I put a vent hole in the top, and it's cut through a trench here. And the reason I did it that way, or even the whole top this way, is I want these things to have a lip on the outside. In other videos, in other designs, it's pretty common to just have like a 1/8 of an inch thin piece of plywood that lays down below this edge. The reason I didn't want to do it that way is because I felt like it was going to be hard to get my hive tool up underneath it and pry it up. You don't have a lot of room to work with. So these actually have that recessed edge where I can get my hive tool up underneath it and lift it up. And then again, this trench cut across the top will allow me to put a outer cover on this, like a telescoping basic outer cover, the same thing that fits all of my other 8-frame hives. And because there's enough room on each inside edge of that outer cover, I can get airflow across these vents, again, without the bees being able to cross over into them. So that's the basic design. I guess the only last thing to mention is why are these wacky colors and why did I choose those colors? It turns out that bees can't see in the, or at least they can't perceive color very well, if at all, on the red end of the light spectrum, but they see very well on the blue end, the ultraviolet end. So all of these colors are, you know, yellow, blue, green. None of them are red, pink, maroon, things like that. Reason it's done this way is, this was just my spin on it, is when the queen's in here and then she goes out for her mating flight, and wants to come back, it makes her really easy to find it. You know, she'll know the general area, but now she'll also be able to pick which side that she came out of because it'll have a distinctive color. Not perfect, but at least it helps them. You don't want your queen going back into the wrong hole and ending up in the wrong chamber. They usually don't, but this helps a little bit for that. So that is how it's built, and you can buy these things too. You can make your own or buy them, but so how do you use them? So what's a queen castle for? Well, what a queen castle's for primarily is when you're working your hives and you find swarm cells, queen cells, that are active, meaning they've got a larva in there, a growing queen, and maybe it's capped, maybe it's not capped yet, but when you find it, you can take that whole frame. So pretend this has one of those cells on it. You put it in a chamber. You take another frame that's got a lot of pollen, especially a lot of pollen and a lot of honey. And, you probably want to look for young, emerging capped brood so that you've got some good young nurse bees in there. And you put these in here like this. You put the lid on, and that's it. Okay, so it's closed up in there. You want to make sure you don't accidentally put the actual queen from the colony you're taking that frame out of. So you just want that cell in there. The bees will figure out pretty quick that they're queenless, and they'll adopt that queen cell and they'll finish it and raise it. And then after it's capped, within a day or two, about 8 days after that, it's 16 days from egg to emergence. But within about 8 to 10 days after you put it in here, she's going to hatch. She'll be a virgin queen, and she's going to move around in here for a day or two to mature and let her wings harden where she can fly. Then she's going to fly, get mated, and that'll take a day or two. And then she's going to come back, and a couple of days after that, she should start laying. And so as after she hatches, around 5, 6, 7 days, you need to open it up and see what she's doing. And if she's been laying, let her lay for a couple of days, but not too long, because if she runs out of places to lay, guess what she's going to do? She's going to swarm, and then you're going to have wasted all your time. So you got to catch her. You got to check them pretty often, after she's hatched. And once she starts laying, then what you can do a couple of things. You can cage the queens. You can find her. She'll be easy to find because it's 2 frames. Cage the queen, and you can put her in one of your other hives, or you can sell her, or whatever you want to do with a mated queen. The other thing you can do is you can take both of these frames out, and you can put them in a nuke or a starter hive and basically begin a new colony, because that's what they are. The other thing you might do is, if you have a frame that has multiple cells on it, if she hatches out of one of those cells, as soon as she hatches and she hasn't destroyed the other cells, you can take that frame out that she's hatched on, and you can move it to one of the other compartments, and you can let the other remaining queens hatch out of those. So you can do that. You'll probably want to put back in another frame here of food and room for her to lay, for the first one to lay. But that's basically what you do. The other thing you can do is, if you just want to raise a queen from eggs, you can do that as well. You just basically take a frame of 1 or 2 day old eggs that has 1 or 2 day old eggs on it, and some newly emerging nurse bees, and you put this in here, okay, close it up, same thing. The only difference is they're going to have to build a new queen cell, but they will do that. They'll build a new queen cell because they know they don't have a queen, and they'll go to those little young eggs, and they'll build 1 or more queen cells, okay? And once they build those queen cells, then you're back to where you were in the first case, and everything else is the same after that. So that's basically how you use these. Like I said, every beekeeper that wants to raise their own queens and has more than a couple of hives, it's good to have one of these on hand. So hope you found this useful.